Want to see a magic trick? Applause, please. Welcome back to Fuzzy Walrus Industries. I'm, of course, Walcom, and today, it's the day. The day I finally get my hands on the NERF Elite Infinus, a blaster that I've been very vocal about wanting to get my hands on because it's so freaking cool. If for some reason you don't know anything about this blaster because you've been living under a rock or something like that, this is a full auto flywheel blaster that has one unique thing that makes it different from like a rapid strike or a hyper fire, and that's the fact that it has a gate in the back. Won't lie, kind of looks like a butthole.
Dude, I said butthole! I did say butthole!
That allows you to feed darts into the drum, or any magazine for that matter of fact, on the fly, without removing the drum, without even stopping to rev the blaster. You can have this thing revving the entire time, pointed at a target, like a zombie horde, and be feeding darts into it. That should be the end of the video right there. That should be all I have to say about the Infinus to convince you that you should buy it, other than the fact that it is $70, and if you don't need that whole auto-reloading mechanism, well, then you can just buy Rapid Strike or Hyperfire. But I think that the entire ingenuity of that auto-loading mechanism is fantastic. Seriously, the Infinus, the ability to top this thing up on the fly is really important. For example, let's say you're in a match, you're fighting against another person who's already shooting at you, and you have a 30-round drum on this thing, because yes, it does come with a 30-round drum, not a 25, not an 18, not a 35, a new 30-round drum. And let's say you've been firing your blaster, and you fired 22 shots to take them out. You've got 8 darts left. And then another threat appears. Now, you have 8 darts left in your magazine, or your drum in this case. What do? Do you A, reload, B, scream, or C, just load more darts into your magazine while your blaster is revved and ready to shoot them? I hope your pick was C, because it's exactly the one thing the Infinus does that no other blaster really does. You could technically say the Nemesis, for instance, could do something like that, because it's just got a big hopper on the top of it with a door that you can pull back. I have a Nemesis. I really should just unbox it and use it in this video, but I'm far too lazy. And that's well and good. In fact, the Nemesis is a very good blaster. There's no reason not to say that it's comparable to something like this, because it just uses a hopper that's really easy to reload. It doesn't have to have all this crazy stuff, but unlike a lot of people, I happen to really like just the standard darts. They're more accurate for the most part. They fly a lot farther than any kind of impact round like the HRRs that the rival rounds use. And they're way easier to pick up on the field because rival rounds have this tendency to kind of bounce around into places. So if you're playing in a field, it's kind of hard to see them. And if you're playing like on concrete or something like that, they're just going to roll all over the place. You're probably going to lose them, and they're really expensive. If you want to field a Nemesis, you've got to have a lot of money for a lot of balls. This, darts are stupidly cheap, and it works with every single dart I have thrown at this thing. It will even try to load Boomco darts into the magazine. It actually can, not that it can fire them, but if it wants to, it can. Short darts, again, it can't fire them, but if you put like 3 short darts in that little hole back there, it will load 2 of them perfectly into the magazine. It blows my mind. Does it jam? I had one jam where it was loading darts kind of awkwardly, but that's because I wasn't using the standard drum magazine. I was actually using the Worker 22-round magazine that Homely sent me because, this just looks frickin' cool in my opinion, and yes, it will still work identically to a drum magazine or standard NERF magazine. Now this thing is powered by 4 D-cell batteries located here in the back of the stock, which is pretty weighty, and unfortunately for D-cells, they're pretty heavy. But the fact it takes 4 of them is actually not too bad, because you can get D-cell batteries in packs of 8 for like, at least around me, like 15 bucks, which is not awesome, but Normally when I buy a blaster, it takes 6 D-cell batteries. This takes 4, so technically one 8-pack will get me 2 full uses of this thing if I wish to keep it stock, which we will talk about modification here in a little bit. And other than that, it's essentially a rapid strike. You've got the same controls you would expect to find on a blaster like this. You've got a rev trigger, you've got a firing trigger that will fire the blaster after you have revved the flywheels, and you've got the ability to change out your magazine with a magazine release right there, just like any blaster you'd expect to have it. And really, that's probably one of the coolest things about this thing, because when I run like a flywheel blaster, I usually run a magazine in the blaster and 6 on my chest rig. And usually that's not even enough for me. However, with something like the Infinus, I could very easily cut that in half, if not a whole lot less. Heck, I probably don't even need an extra magazine because I can very easily just top this thing up on the fly. That is good for basically anybody. I mean, if you were to buy an Infinus, you don't necessarily need to have extra magazines. And if you choose to get extra magazines in the future, then you could use those. That's a really good setup, and and I will talk about some kind of negatives here. I wish the reloading mechanism was slightly faster, like 20% faster, because when I have this thing, I can actually feed darts in here fast enough that it can't keep up, which is a bit of a disappointment. I did load an X-shot dart in there. It will load those into the magazine, but it doesn't really like them because they're slightly shorter than normal. There we go. That's awesome, but wish it was just slightly faster, so if I really wanted to, in fact, if I have this thing not pointed at an awkward angle, I could very easily just point the blaster down and shove darts into it, and I'm just slightly too fast for it sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. But I just loaded, I don't know how many darts of how many different shapes and sizes into this magazine, and it works perfectly fine. There's a status indicator LED located right near the rear loading port on this blaster that is solid green when the blaster is ready to be fired, it's solid yellow or amber when the blaster doesn't have any darts in it, and it's solid red when the blaster is inoperable. Maybe you have like the door on the side where you can check to see if there's any jams or anything like that open, stuff like that, and it will flash yellow when you have too many darts in the blaster and it can't load another one into the magazine. It's really hard to jam this blaster. I have managed to do it because it will feed darts in backwards. It doesn't seem to really care. That can lead to some jams in a magazine, but it's very minimal how many times I've had this thing jam. I've actually tried to jam it a lot, and that was about as worse as I could get it. Otherwise, it works nearly flawlessly no matter what I put in that little loading door in the back of the blaster. And after putting this thing through the chronograph, it hits an average of 70 FPS, which is about what you'd expect from any kind of stock elite blaster. Fire rate is pretty okay. That's about what you'd expect from a stock blaster at this point. Not nearly as fast as like the Hyperfire, because of course that used the conveyor belt mechanism, which is a bit more efficient at shooting darts. It does use the rapid strike style pusher, which means essentially this thing is a rapid strike with this weird auto reloading mech on it. It's not great or anything like that. It's not going to blow you away. Some of the competitor blasters, like of course the Light Command from Dart Zone, hits way harder. That can be an issue, but of course, I'm a modder. I can mod this thing, hopefully, in the near future, to hit way harder. And yeah, we need to talk about the modification potential, because I'm going to put a picture up on screen from Blvd NERF about the internals of the Infinus, and this thing is a nightmare inside. It is really, really bad. Not only does it have all the stuff of a rapid strike, but it's also got the brain box and that massive reloading mech, and that makes me really scared to even touch this thing inside. Thankfully, I do have 2, but that is a scary, scary thing. It's going to take a little while until people properly mod this thing, and honestly, I'm not going to be the first to take a swing at it because I'm just going to break one. I already know how this went with the regulator, so I'm just going to, I'm just going to wait for it because I might as well, because I want this thing to be awesome. And yes, it does need to hit a little bit harder for me to fully enjoy it. And that being said, once you do modify it, that very easy way of controlling the rate of fire with a single shot or full auto is going to fall out the window. I do wish this thing had select fire built into it. I don't really know why it doesn't. It would be literally one more switch. That's the only thing it's really missing. With a slightly faster auto loading mechanism, this thing would be perfect. That being said, it's huge. This is one of the thickest Nerf blasters I have ever seen. Unfortunately, the front of it, while it does look kind of goofy, this is exceptionally comfortable, I might add. This is all hollow plastic, which you can feel when you grip this thing. It flexes and kind of twists a little bit, which is not great. The overall aesthetics of the blaster are on point. I think this thing looks phenomenal. Hasbro's design team is really on point right now with most of the blasters they have coming out. Most people, yeah, the front of the Delta Trooper looks freaking ridiculous, but it's not that bad in my opinion, and this kind of carries on the same really, really nice texturing. It does have some of that tiger stripe kind of digital camo on it, which I like way more than the original digital camo they've been using for the NERF N Strike line. But it's still really nice. Lots of color separation, lots of different type of textures on this. You've got matte, you've got honeycombing, you've got very, very glossy plastic, and even on the back of the stock in this black right here, it's really, really nicely textured. It almost feels like rubber coating. It's amazing. I think the blaster looks freaking cool, and really the only thing you have on it besides the one N-Strike attachment point up here, and one up here, if you happen to have two scopes or something like that, I'm not quite sure what they were thinking there, you do have a muzzle attachment point. I'm not sure what muzzle attachment point you'd want to put on here. My guess is some kind of suppressor looking thing, because if you put any other kind of attachment point up there, like barrel, it just looks goofy. There we go. It just didn't look goofy enough. Now the goof troop is complete. But all honesty, the Infinus is an awesome blaster. I can't recommend it highly enough. If for some reason you really just don't think you need that auto-loading mechanism, just buy a Rapid Strike, buy a Hyperfire, just forget this thing even exists. But if you do like that idea, and trust me, I think you really, really should, you can just pick one of these things up and it's absolutely awesome. I say this with no hyperbole. I think the Infinus will be my top blaster for 2018. I don't really give that accolade that much to Nerf blasters. I've been a very harsh critic of Hasbro in the past, but this is something that I just can't get over how cool it is. It's something I've wanted for a very, very long time, next to, like, you know, a tube-fed pump-action shotgun, which modders keep making really, really cool ones. In fact, myself, I'm going to get my hands on one very, very soon and show off, but I just never seem to get the things that I want, and this is something that I definitely want. There is one contender to this, and that is, of course, the Dart Zone Command Fire, which is kind of like a Nemesis, but with standard Nerf darts. That's going to be very interesting to see how that works, but I'm going to safely say that the Infinus is going to be my top pick for the moment, and honestly, I really recommend you get one of these things. Now, the good news is I'm getting this slightly ahead of time. If you have not seen my story on how I managed to get this thing days before it's released, well, I'll have a video up on that as well, because it's a really good story. But that being said, if you are looking for this blaster, the biggest sign I could possibly give you is that the street date for these blasters is apparently my birthday, July 16th. So if you're watching after that fact, you can probably go to Amazon or even go to a store and probably find these things on shelves. I did check my local Target through BrickSeek and they weren't quite in stock yet, but I'm willing to bet that's going to change here over the next couple of days. And honestly, I do like it with the Worker 22 mag in there, but this drum just looks so cool. And one small thing is that this thing looks like it's going to be beautiful for taking apart and painting, because there's lots of separation, lots of really easy details to paint on right there. I just love it. It's awesome. Seriously, Hasbro, you've outdone yourself with the Infinus, and you've made me a massive, massive fanboy of it. Let me know what you think about the Infinus down in the comment section below. If you believe there's anything I missed, I would love to hear about it. And if you do like this video and you like this kind of content, please hit that like button. I know you can't see how many likes are there because I have those turned off because, you know, somebody's been using a dislike bomber for the last 2 years on my channel to dump, you know, thousands of dislikes on my videos through Russia. That's not cool, but, you can, of course, still hit that like and dislike button, and it really still, it helps my channel more than ever, so I'd really appreciate it. I don't normally talk about that kind of stuff, but if you watch this far, I would assume you kind of like my content, and I would appreciate your support. I'm Walcom S7. Thank you very much for watching this video, and of course, I hope to see you in an entirely different one.
You gotta